How are you doing? My name is Joseph Ngugi. I am one of the co-founders of Pre-PT Grind. And I'm excited to be on this live stream tonight to talk about a topic that really isn't talked about much with us as pre-PTs and physical therapists like myself, but is a very important conversation to have, especially if you are a student that is currently applying, whether you've gotten rejected, whether this is your first time getting rejected, second time, if this is, maybe you've taken the GRE, things have not gone so well, and so on and so forth. But this is a really important conversation to have. I'm just gonna talk tonight, and tonight I want to have a conversation with you. Megan, how you doing? Shanahan, it's always great. Man, Shanahan is the first person on every single live stream, I promise. So we're gonna have a very good conversation tonight, and I just want to talk about a very important topic of getting out of the mental rabbit hole. I've spoken with a lot of pre-PTs recently who have been struggling with this very thing, regardless of where they're at in their journey. But honestly, I have struggled with it a lot. Sarah, how you doing? I've struggled with this a lot. I still, many times, not as frequently as I used to, but I still at times struggle with it. I was telling my fiance yesterday, we were on our way to Orlando in the morning. I was telling my fiance yesterday morning that for me, it's even affected the way I communicate with people. It literally used to be, Kaylee, how you doing? Like it used to affect me to the point where I would overthink absolutely everything. Like if anyone's ever texted me, I'm a pretty clear texter, as in that means like when I'm excited, I'll put in like 3 exclamation marks. If I'm not too excited, I'll put in like no punctuation or whatever. But that's because I always have misinterpreted everything else around me. And that misinterpretation has really, looking in the mirror, been because a lot of self-doubt, a lot of self-created anxieties that have just been reflected in many other areas of my life. That's kind of why I'm very clear about my energy level, because I never want people to mistake how I feel about them. But at the end of the day, this is something that is absolutely important to understand and absolutely important to know how to conquer as a pre-PT, regardless of where. And if there's somebody that you know would benefit heavily from this conversation, would benefit heavily from listening to this topic, make sure you tag them, bring them into this group, show them, hey, this is something you will really, really, really want to listen to. Because I don't really care where you are on your journey. Bree, how are you doing? Isaac, what's up, brother? I don't really care where you're at. This is something that we have all struggled with. It's something we've all struggled with. If you've had a point, at any point in your journey where you're saying to yourself, I don't know if I can handle this, and I'll have to grab a charger here in a second. I just came from the clinic, and I didn't realize that my phone didn't have as much charge as I needed, but honestly, I just feel like I can't handle this. I feel like I can't handle getting rejected. I spoke within the last 3 weeks, I've spoken to 4 pre-PTs who've gotten rejected this cycle and are just struggling with figuring out what to do next, struggling with knowing how to handle it, struggling with knowing how to navigate everything, struggling with understanding how to push themselves, how to keep going, how to talk to their parents and tell them, well, I didn't get in, but I want to try again, talking themselves into it. And so that brings us to this topic, getting out of the mental rabbit hole. Getting out of the mental rabbit hole. And I've found myself in it far too many times, and I don't want you to stop yourself short of your dream of becoming a physical therapist because you're stuck in it yourself. Or even when you're stuck in it, you don't know how to get out of it. And that's what I want to share tonight. I want to share how to get out of that rabbit hole. How to recognize that you're in it. But how to get out of it, and how to get whoever is around you. If you have a classmate, if you have a friend that is stuck with this process, you got in. You're celebrating. You're like, yo, I got accepted. But then they maybe didn't get in. Understanding how to help them pull themselves out of that same frustrating position, because it hurts, it sucks, it's frustrating. But in understanding how to pull ourselves out of those thoughts that we create for ourselves thoughts that I many times create for myself, that's really the only way we can push ourselves to take the step forward to reapply. That's the only way we can push ourselves forward to take the GRE again and know exactly how to do it and know exactly what to do in order to retake a certain class, a certain prerequisite, and know that we can actually do well in that class. Without having to, this is not something that I want to make very like feel good only. I want to make this very real, tangible steps that you can take right now in order to really help yourself, because I have to keep reminding myself of this. These are steps that I have to keep, taking myself on. Within the last 2 months, I've had instances myself where I've had to speak with people that are close to me, with my fiance being the primary one, where I'm just helping me to rewrite a story that I've created in my head, a narrative that I've created in my head. And before I dive in, I had a now friend of mine, but also mentee of mine, who about a year ago was applying to their second cycle of physical therapy school. What's up, Benjamin? How you doing? They were applying to their second cycle of physical therapy school, absolutely excited about the fact that after not getting in their first time, they were going to put themselves in a position now to get in a second time. And they did everything they thought was right. Applied. This is literally last fall of 2017. Applied, did everything they had to do, and ultimately did not get in. Did not get into PT school, and they found themselves exactly where we're talking about tonight, in the mental rabbit hole that really played into the confidence that they had, that played into the drive to just keep doing this. It's like, well, what's the point in me applying again if I'm just gonna get the same result? I tried, I applied once and I didn't get in. So what's the point in doing it again and just going through this a third time? I have classmates that have gone through this, but I have to go through this a third time, knowing that I don't know any other way of improving my application. And so I actually had the opportunity of meeting with that individual for the first time this past Saturday night. They flew in from the West Coast. They had a PT school interview this weekend that they absolutely destroyed. But the bottom line is they had a PT school interview. They applied again. And as we're talking, I have been speaking with this person for months. They're part of our acceptance system and just coaching them on how to get through this process. And the biggest thing that happens when we don't succeed at something that we are targeting the first time is doubt. The second time, that doubt is even heavier. The anxiety, the fear of potentially not even getting across the finish line, that gets even heavier. And that's what this person was going through. That's what a lot of you, honestly, are going through in many different ways. And so as I'm sitting across this, I'm sitting at the table with this pre-PT, my fiance is there, and we're just talking about how life has been. I could see that there was a different level of confidence that this student had. There was a swagger about her. She had told me about how her interview, like she was able to clarify her story. She was very poised. She had this feeling of, no, this is it. This is it, and it's because of what I have done during this past year. And a lot of what she did was not necessarily just going back and, retaking a billion courses or anything. A lot of it was figuring out how to get herself out of her own rabbit hole. Out of the doubts, the thoughts, the conversations that she was having with herself that put her in a very dark place. And really, it's easy to put yourself there. We can't blame her. I can't blame anyone that goes there. I can't blame myself when I go there. But understanding how to get yourself out of there is even more vital, is even more essential. Otherwise, she doesn't apply again. And if she does, she probably does it in the same way she did it before. She probably does it with less energy, with an air about her that actually doesn't even draw anyone to her when she's having a conversation. But because she chose to figure out how to navigate that journey, she was able to become the applicant that she is today. She's currently working for a company that is a very big platform in the United States for helping students pass their board exams. She's working for that company, helping them with their marketing and so many other aspects, because she says, you know what, I have to push myself, but it's because of the confidence that I've had to train myself over time on how to pull myself out of that hole. And so this is how you pull yourself out of that position of being in a mental rabbit hole. That's the analogy that I'm using. That's the term that I'm using to talk about just being stuck, being confused, being lost in the thoughts and the storylines that we create. And that's really what it is. It's a storyline we create. If you see somebody, for example, if you see somebody at a store, right, and they look at you a certain way, like for me, here's how I used to interpret it. I used to interpret it as like, yo, like that person like really did not appreciate me being here, and I would start, like, especially if it was someone that I thought was an acquaintance or a potential friend, I would overthink everything, and I would actually take, Sarah, I hear you, Jeremy, how you doing, brother? But I would actually like put myself in a position where I'm just like, yo, it's like I must not be the kind of person people want to be around. Maybe there's something about me that people don't. Okay, and then that translated to me as a student. That translated into me as a physical therapist. That translated into me as an influencer. I'm talking about even online. I'm talking about like when I had my first webinar where we were, launching the Pre-PT Success program. Like in that first webinar, there was somebody in there that was questioning, my intentions. And I remember just kind of keeping myself poised. But at the end of it, feeling like, yo, like they didn't understand that I was trying to do everything in my power to just give and empower pre-PTs to absolutely dominate their application process. Funny enough, that's the same time that I met the young lady that I was meeting with this past weekend. And as I was going through my own frustrations, through my own anxieties, she was starting the process of rewriting hers. To becoming the person that's so confident today, to becoming the person that's so clear-headed today. Completely learning how to pull herself out of it. And here's how you do it. Really, to begin with, getting yourself out of the mental rabbit hole is like any other skill. You have to train yourself. You have to start training yourself. And really, for me, the hardest thing that I've had to learn, and honestly, I've had to learn this from friends of mine that have become good at this, with doing it with their lives, but really, like getting good or getting better at retelling myself a different story. Getting good at, if I don't get accepted into a school, understanding, well, maybe that wasn't the school that was designed for me. So good riddance. Maybe that wasn't the program I was supposed to be in. Maybe, heck, you know what? Maybe my storyline involves me being able to impact or influence another student because of the struggle that I'm about to go through. I'm still meant to be a physical therapist. But just because I got rejected doesn't mean that I have to accept that as who I am. Someone that is not worth or worthy to be a doctor of physical therapy. Someone that is not worthy to be in a PT program. Someone that does not have what it takes to get accepted into a PT program. So it starts with what you tell yourself. It starts with like getting to the point, hi Michael, how you doing? Getting to the point where you can retell yourself that story faster and faster each time a negative thought comes about. Each time you start putting yourself into that dark place where you're starting to overthink and say, maybe I can't, maybe I won't, maybe I shouldn't. The faster you can start to tell yourself a different story, you know what, maybe I should. Maybe I am meant to be. Maybe my storyline is not really the way I had scripted it, but it's still my story. But learning how to tell yourself a different story much, much faster. Learning how to tell yourself that there are other programs. It's not just one program. What's up, Sarah? Learning how to tell yourself, Katie, I completely agree with you. There are other programs. Learning how to understand that there is a completely different storyline that is actually closer to the truth. The story we usually tell ourselves, the one that puts us in that very dark place, the story that we tell ourselves is usually the most like outlandish one there is. The reality of everything is usually much more in line with something that is a lot more positive or falls in line with what we are actually capable of. When Casey got rejected the first time,
Casey Coleman, when he got rejected the first time, the one thing that he decided to do was retell himself a completely different story fast. He was doing that fast because he was around other classmates that he had started out his freshman year with that were getting accepted, that were getting phone calls, that had already been locked in, that were part of that journey with him. And because of that, he realized, okay, all right, I have to retell myself a story, otherwise I'll never end up in the same class as them. I can, I will, I must. You got it, Shanahan. I have to retell myself a different story. And very quickly, he had to really say, okay, flip this. Flip this. I'm going to be a doggone physical therapist, but I have to do things a little differently. So he took a step back. He said, I have to do things a little differently. I have to lay things out a little better than I did before. The first time, I was coming from being a pre-farm student. I jumped into being a pre-PT. Okay, cool. All right. Let me reconfigure everything. But I have to lock into the fact that I'm still meant to be a physical therapist. Best advice I got when applying is be yourself, stay true to your values. Making yourself fit in the wrong program for you can affect your confidence. Exactly. My dream school was one that I didn't even hear about until 2 months before applying. Bree, 100%. But what story are we telling ourselves? What story are we using to rewrite the very things that are putting ourselves like in a position to not act, in a position to not reapply, in a position to not find that one program that is a match for us? All it takes is one school. All it takes is one school. And so there are, yes, strategies to get accepted into PT school, but that's not what we're talking about tonight. Tonight we're talking about how to take yourself out of that mental state where you're just stuck, where you're just like, that anxiety has built up to the point where you're like, yo, I can't do this. Maybe this isn't for me. Maybe this was for Sarah. Maybe this was for Casey. Maybe this was for Shanahan, but it's not for me. It's not for me. Funny enough, that story that I was telling you about, here's what that young lady said this past weekend. She said, knowing that, keep in mind, this was her third time applying this year. She said, and I'm quoting now, my confidence and mentality has changed so much within this last year that I'm in a much better place. I'm in a much better place regardless of being in my third attempt of applying into PT school. And also understanding that for her, she had to be around other people that were able to pull her out of her dark place, out of those anxieties and fears. She says this, I feel incredibly blessed. How many can say this? I feel incredibly blessed to have been rejected 2 years in a row. I need you to listen very carefully. She says, I feel incredibly blessed to have been rejected 2 years in a row because otherwise I wouldn't have met such remarkable people that are literally life changers. She found her community. She found other people that were able to take her out of that mental rabbit hole. So regardless of where you're at in your journey, what's up, man? How you doing, brother? Like, regardless of where you're at, if you want to be a physical therapist, then doggone it, strap down and be a physical therapist. But part of that means that we have to learn how to pull ourselves out of those mental rabbit holes faster. The longer you let it settle down, the longer it takes, well, the harder it is to climb out. Casey, I know you're on live, man. Like Casey, for you, with your story, if you had let it sit for 6 months, 7 months, 8 months, just letting that pain, frustration, anxiety, just letting it sit, what would it have done to your action plan that has led to where you are now today as a co-founder of Pre-PT Grind, as a physical therapist treating people in Chicago? What would that have done to you, bro? What would that have done to many of you in here? What would that have done to that pre-PT that I just told you about tonight that says, I feel incredibly blessed to have been rejected 2 years in a row? I feel incredibly blessed to have been rejected. Like, who can say that? How can we even rejoice in our downfalls? It's because we recognize that it's all part of our story. And whatever your story is, it's not defined by you just getting into PT school the first time and that's it. It's not defined by you just taking your GRE one time and passing it and that's it. It's not defined by you having a semester where you're absolutely being destroyed and say, well, I guess I can't handle PT school then at this rate, so, let me pull the plug. Those mental places that we put ourselves are only created by one person, us, me. Every doubt that I have, I created it. Every amount of anxiety that I have, I created it. Anxiety is about, it's just fear of something that hasn't even happened. It doesn't even exist. It's not even real. I created that. So every time that I'm finding myself in a dark place, every time I misinterpret somebody and say, you know what, based on what I think they might have met, maybe they don't dig me, I can't really care about that. This live stream probably wouldn't exist. You're right, Casey. So we have to understand that. We all have it. I think a lot of times we feel like we're the only ones going through it. We all have it. We all have our mental rabbit holes. But the quicker we can pull ourselves out of it. Now, we'll talk strategy and all that stuff is cool. But the quicker we can just pull ourselves out of that and just give ourselves a different narrative, a different storyline that completely flips. Every negative thought that you have, every negative feeling that you have about whatever situation you are currently in as a pre-PT, completely tell yourself the opposite, and that's much closer to the truth than what you had previously told yourself. That is always much closer to the truth than what you had previously told yourself. Zanaya, how you doing? And so tonight, that's why I had to come on here live. That's why I had to talk about this topic. And if you know somebody that is a pre-PT, that is in their journey towards getting into physical therapy school and they are stuck, make sure they see this video. If they're not in the pre-doctor physical therapy students page where it is right now, make sure they still see this video. Find a way to get them to this video. If this is an audio by now, if this is turned into a podcast at some point, find a way to get somebody to listen to this that needs to listen to it, because we don't talk about it enough as pre-PTs. We don't talk about it enough in the field of physical therapy. And that is the reason why most people do not win. That is the reason why most people will not get into physical therapy school if they let this sit down. That's why most people will not be able to accomplish the things they want to accomplish, period. Even with pre-PT grind, I've had my mental rabbit holes. To the point where at times I almost just said, yo, Casey, you want to just take over pre-PT grind altogether? I told them that. Well, I told them that later, not in the moment. But I had to figure out how to get myself out of those rabbit holes so that I could continue to serve through this platform. So I could continue to serve my patients as a physical therapist. So I could continue to serve my fiance, my friends, my colleagues, my community here. I have to pull myself out of it. I have no other choice. And neither do you. The only person that can determine that is you. Now, we're here to help you out of that. There's a community that is there designed to help you out of that. You just have to desire that first step. You just have to decide to make that step and say, you know what? I'm going to reach out to somebody. Whether it's me, Casey, our team, someone in the pre-doctor physical therapy students group, a family member, a fiance, a loved one, a spouse, it does not matter. But find someone that can pull you out of that rabbit hole faster than you can. And as they do that, train yourself to tell yourself a different story faster each time. Anytime a negative thought comes about, reinterpret it faster. If it's the GRE, reinterpret it faster. If it's your semester, reinterpret it faster. If it's applying to PT school, reinterpret it faster. You have to. You have to keep moving forward. You're right, Shanahan. Shanahan says you have to keep pushing forward because there are others that you haven't met that are depending on you to make it. You got it. But we can't do that if we are stuck in our mental rabbit holes. So once you figure that out, and once you figure out how to do that consistently and train yourself, it's training. It's not something you just do once. Train yourself. The small things every single day. Train yourself. Start doing it with the small things. And when it comes down to things like the application, getting into PT school, the GRE, the bigger things, it becomes a lot easier to reinterpret everything and look at it through different lenses, through different goggles. And if there's one thing I want you to know tonight, is that any negative thought you have, I already said it before, but any negative thought you have, it flipped 180 degrees to the exact opposite. That which you're not really feeling at that time, the exact opposite is usually far closer to the truth than what we're currently telling ourselves. So if you're stuck and you're saying, I want to get myself out of my mental rabbit hole, but I'm stuck, and you need to talk to somebody, reach out to us even. Go to contactpreptgrind.com. Reach out to us. Let's talk about it. Let's figure out how to help you on your journey. But this is a skill that any and every person in this group listening to me right now needs to master. Otherwise, our entire journey towards getting to PT school might be in vain.